Everyone. This is Prashasti, your podcast host today. Joining me is Virginie Bouyx, author and lawyer born in Porto, currently residing in Chennai. She has published three works till date: Chinese Cities, Florists, and Lavarhome, being one of her recent works. In this podcast, we are going to explore her creative process, a bit about contemporary French literature, and then at the very last, we'll talk about her latest work, La Varangue. Welcome to the very first episode of the podcast, Virginie Bouyx. Can you please introduce yourself just briefly?
Thank you. So I'm French. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a writer, and I published three books, as you said, two collections of short stories at Gallimard Publishing Company, and one debut novel. We say this one was published in 2024 at Le Pommier. Le Pommier, it's a small publishing company what was founded by a French philosopher, Michel Serres, and it focuses on books that will connect nature and humanities and science. So, yeah, as for myself, I don't know what to say more.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to start us off with your creative process, because all of your books are in French, and both of the first books you've written, I think, long back before you published La Varangue. And all of them have different themes, but the first two are they're a bit more connected, linked with one another than La Varangue. So if you could just describe your creative process for your very first book, how did you get started?
Yeah, so you are right. Les Fleuristes, or The Florists, and Ville Chinoise, Chinese Cities. So are collections of short stories. And at this time, I was living in Russia and China, and after I went back to France. But I think I didn't begin to write in foreign countries. I always wrote when I was a little girl also, but I began to have the idea of uh, finishing a work and maybe publish when I was in China, actually. So the first books are collection of short stories. Les Fleuristes, sorry. It's short story which take place in China, Russia, and France, and the characters are ordinary people for the main part of them. Let's say an old man, old Chinese teacher, for instance, an old Russian veteran of the World War II, a young girl on the beach in France. So it's difficult to explain the creative process.
When you were right.
Yeah.
Sorry. When you were in Russia and China, writing in French, was that the reason maybe you felt a bit disconnected from France and
yeah, because I
you
used to compare my writings, if I can say that, when I was in France with French authors.
right.
And in China and also in Russia, I didn't have the opportunity to read so much French authors, so I read I read mainly in English, and I was disconnected from France, and it was a good thing because maybe it helped me to find a style. And I also wanted to keep memories of the places and people of these countries because I knew that I will live one day. So let's say that all the books, these two books are kind of photograph albums, or or travel diary, even if the characters are totally fictional. Um, I had the ideas of characters or stories, meeting people or only seeing people in the street. For instance, I talked about the Chinese teacher. It's a character who wants to give his bird, because he has a bird. He wants to give his bird a perfect cage, and the idea of the character came from all these Chinese old maids
Right.
sitting in the street with birds, and also with the meeting of cage shopper, cage
Right.
sellers.
Right. Because even though the story is fictional and the characters are fictional, all of the details that surround the
Yeah,
stories for both the books, Flores and Ville Chinoise, you've chosen to depict them very, very specifically with all of the locations and details.
yeah. I wanted
Yes.
to be really accurate for locations, and also this kind of detail, how you can build a cage, for instance, for these short stories or things like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And maybe if I ask you, how long did it take for you to write the first book, and then was it much different than the second book? Maybe a bit shorter.
Uh, I can say that. Actually, the short stories of the first books are shorter than the short stories of the second book. Maybe it's half, you see.
Right.
When I decided to write something, uh, and to make something uh, not only for myself,
Hmm.
I thought that because I will not have the time to say to myself that it's awful, nobody will be interested in it, etc. So I began with short stories, and actually I wrote them very quickly. Maybe half a day for short stories of Les Fleuristes,
Oh, wow.
and one day for short stories in Ville Chinoise. After, you have also, of course, a rereading process,
Hmm.
but it was quite short, and I should say that I didn't change so much the the words. It was quite instinctive, but it needed a specific state of mind, a specific mood. And I knew that there were days where it would have been quite difficult, so I didn't try to work during these days.
Okay.
And yes, but how to say, it's also a kind of habit. If you are used to do something, you will
Hmm.
do that better and better, etc. So I began with one short stories. The first one, I think maybe it was L'Oiseau, the bird, or maybe it's the story of this old man with his bird, or maybe the story of the old Russian veteran. Um, and when I began, I finished this story, and I say to myself, but it's okay. I can go on and go ahead and try to find other stories.
Okay.
This kind of
So
story, maybe. Yeah.
since you said you instinctively just sat and then wrote the story in that particular time period or on that day, and then you didn't force yourself to write. So,
Sometimes a little bit, but not so much for these
okay.
books, I would say,
Hmm.
and for Varangue also. But yeah,
Hmm. So would you say your writing style is a bit instinctive?
yeah, yeah. It's a bit
Yes.
instinctive,
Okay.
but you need to sometimes to make some research,
Mm.
to think about an event you want to describe, etc. It's not coming for nothing, of course.
Okay.
But
Okay.
when I began to write, it's becoming instinctive, I would say.
Okay.
There is
And
maybe a need of time to mature, you know.
so all of the stories, they came maybe one day you woke up and then you may have experienced something the week before and that inspired the story, or was it you had all of these stories already in your mind, and then when you started writing, they started, maybe popping up, the ideas kept coming to you.
It's difficult to say. I think it's a fruit of maturation. I can have an idea of a story and suddenly find the perfect place for the story to occur. But
Okay.
sometimes it came from the place, and sometimes for a character, from the character. Um, yeah, it was actually it was not so difficult at this
Okay.
time because and it was the case for Les Fleuristes and also for Ville Chinoise. It was at the beginning it was only a test. I didn't I didn't wanted these books be published. I wanted to make tests and to end something, to finish something, because I didn't finish anything. I began at this time. I began a lot of novels from maybe my childhood, and never finished the novels. And that's why I choose short stories to gain confidence. You say to gain confidence to yes, and so it was quite honest and natural. And after having writing, having wrote some short stories, I began to say to myself, but maybe this could be the book actually, and not something else. And I began to write other short stories in this with this objective, with this aim, but also thinking that it would be a very, very big chance if I succeed to publish it. So I was not sure that it will be okay, that it will be published, and I didn't have problem with that.
Okay. So
I was happy to have been able to finish the stories, you know. So it was already
okay.
something for me.
Mm, you say that, but your book has been published by Gallimard, which is
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
the biggest.
it was a
Yes.
kind of dream. So
Yes,
at the beginning,
exactly.
I thought that they made a mistake, really. When I
Ah,
received
no.
the first email from Roger Grenier, who was my publisher at Gallimard, he was an old man, friend of Albert Camus, etc. And I had a very big chance because he loved short stories. He was a uh, very good author, and he wrote short stories himself. And he also loved Chekhov, and so
Mm.
my books were speaking about Russia for one of them. So for him, it was interesting. But yes, at the beginning, I thought that they made a mistake.
I assure you they didn't. Um, Now we can, I think, move on to a bit about the inspiration for your very recent work, La Varangue.
Mhm.
The previous two books, they are a collection of short stories, and this one is a novel, entirely different from the previous two works. What inspired you to, change from short stories and to, write a complete novel?
Mhm. Write a complete novel was a goal.
Hmm.
And actually, I had a lot of tapuscripts in my computer, but nothing good, maybe. And this book was written quite shortly, also quite quickly. And you said it's a novel. Of course, it's a novel, but it's a quite short novel, and you have different stories inside. So maybe it's a novel which is made by short stories, and maybe I'm almost a short story writer. I don't know, I'm not sure of that. But yes, I wanted to write a novel, of course, and as the two first books, it was not something who was dedicated to be published at the beginning. I had the idea. So one of the things of the story of La Varangue is the death of mother, mourning, etc. And I lost my mother a few years before writing the book, so it was a theme important for me. And I wanted to speak about that, but in a different way, not accurate way, actually. I wanted maybe to go back to my childhood or things like that. And I also, the first books were very accurate. In some books, you can have some very, in Virginie, sorry, there are maybe two short stories where you can find a kind of magical realism elements, but not so much. And at this time when I was writing La Varangue, I used to read a lot of authors who use magical realism, like
So, were there
American
any,
etc. So maybe it was
okay,
a kind of inspiration. Yeah.
were there any
Mm.
French authors that inspired you, or
Not so
any?
much. Maybe yeah, I'm almost what to say. My main sources of inspirations are foreign authors. I would say Latin American authors or Japanese authors. For instance, Yoko Ogawa or Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Isabel Allende. It's a style very different, but yeah, I loved at this time the way they put into real stories magical elements, and it was something interesting for me. But when I began La Varangue, I didn't know exactly where I was going, and it was not important. I began to write. It should have been totally different at the end, actually. I began to write. I wrote the first chapter, and I said to myself, but maybe it's okay, and maybe I will continue that, and I will see. And I began to construct the story and to have an idea, of course, of where I wanted to go. But at the very beginning, I didn't have really idea of what I was doing.
Okay, so the
Maybe it's a
conclusion
good way
was
to write, actually, not so
right.
professional, or I don't know. But
Very intuitive.
yeah, I know that as for me, when I write something with a specific when I try to do things with steps, etc., it's becoming very often boring, and so I stop in general. That's
Okay.
not good. I know it reminds me too much my job.
Okay. Maybe growing up, you were inspired by any French authors or American ones, like you sent some Asian authors. So while growing up in France, were you already surrounded by literature, or you maybe
Yeah,
developed an interest for literature later?
yeah, literature was something very normal in my family. I had this chance. One of my aunts was a teacher of French literature in high school, so she was this kind of person, it's a kind of magical person. She always knew which book will be the good book for you at which time of your life. It was a very I don't know, surprising. And my parents were fond of literature. My father was most on focus on non-fiction, but non-fiction or maybe diaries of well-known people, etc., and politicians. And my mother painted, and she also loved a lot of authors, like Russian authors, etc. And she helped me to discover a lot of authors from everywhere in the world, I would say. And I should say also that when they married, my parents didn't ask for usual gifts. They asked for books. So we had a
Wow.
lot of books in our flat, and I spent all my childhood and when I was teenager also and student, all my money came to books. So I used to go to bookshops and with a kind of I had maybe 10 or 12 or 15 books at the end, and step by step I chose maybe less books because it should be too expensive for me, etc. But yeah, it was something normal for me to read and to buy books and to go to bookshops, also to libraries, but most to bookshops. And yeah,
And do you have
I
a
was very
favorite
curious. Mm, mm, mm,
favorite
mm.
book, favorite genre that you
I
loved as a
didn't
child?
At this time, when I was a very young girl, maybe my favorite book was The Lion by Joseph Kessel.
Okay.
Joseph Kessel was a journalist, and I wanted to be this kind of journalist,
Hmm.
going on war, how to say, countries, yeah, and uh, and to describe the real life, etc. Yeah, I think it was my favorite book. After I discovered a lot of authors, and I cannot I cannot say that I have or that I had after that a favorite book. I was very impressed by Proust.
Hmm.
So maybe it's too common to say that, but really I think it's when I read In Search of the Lost Time, um, I I realized that you can speak about normal life, and I said to myself that maybe it's a way to explore.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I realized that the feelings which was describing were my feelings. So when you are a teenager, it's interesting.
Right.
Um, and
To
in
be
the
able
same
to be
time,
connected. Hmm.
I used to read the Rougon-Macquart, Émile Zola works, and also Voyage au bout de la nuit, Travel to the End of the Night by
At the end of it.
Céline.
Yes.
Kind of, and
Right.
maybe it did something, yeah. And after and in the same time, I also discovered um, Japanese, Asian, and Latin American authors.
Right.
I used to read Russian authors very early because my mother was fond of them, and I also decided to learn Russian at school. So I was, how to say, obliged to discover them maybe too early. I don't know. Um,
When you talk about the Francophone literature and Asian literature, um, is that the reason that you choose in Barhong to talk about La Réunion as the main place where all the events take place?
I don't know. I wanted to speak about death
Hmm.
and mourning, and I wanted to have a beautiful place for the
Hmm.
story because the subject is not beautiful at all.
Right.
Actually, it was for me. It was at this time when I wrote the book. It was after maybe 2 years. My mother died 2 years before, and I go through different steps of mourning. I
Right.
think you can say that it's very common, but at the beginning it was something very really awful, horrible, and I began to write things describing uh, disease, etc., and death, but quite too much accurate, I would say, uh, and not very interesting. Um, and yeah, I was, as I say, I used to live in China,
Mhm.
And I went back to France. And so I was in France when I decided to write this book. But I
Um,
needed an exotic place, and
right,
I so I went to the Réunion Island only for a touristic trip, and I think there is South China landscapes, but I was too yeah, my years in China were too. I didn't remember so much the landscapes, and I didn't wanted to describe something that I didn't remember very well. So I decided to use La Réunion Island like as a framework of the story, but it could have been maybe somewhere else. And at the time, I didn't know that if I will keep the name of the island or not. And I
right.
tried one version without the name of the island, and maybe yeah, it was difficult because it's I cannot say that I know La Réunion Island.
Mhm.
I was there, but
Right.
it's not.
To say that you
Not
know it.
I
Right.
I was a tourist, so it's very difficult for me to say that I will speak about something I saw
Mhm.
maybe 20
Right.
days.
I
It's
think, like you've mentioned, La Réunion, it's and you're using a theme that is very, very morbid. You're
yeah,
talking about death, and at the same time, you're using the backdrop La Réunion, which is extremely vibrant and with a lot of colors, beauty, everything. So it gives a good paradox of one side you're using the theme that is death, and then on the other hand, you have the beautiful island where everything is taking place.
yeah,
Um,
and then
can
also I think you think all the characters or the main characters are not from La Réunion, and that was a
right,
choice because they have a vision of the island, which is the vision of somebody who doesn't know well this
right,
island, and
right.
it's also my vision. Maybe
Mhm,
their vision are quite different from mine, but yeah, they cannot say they are from La Réunion, and
mhm.
so they cannot. Yeah,
Right.
I
They
don't
they are
think.
not identified,
Mhm.
yes, by the island. We see the same sort of paradox with the name of the book, La Varangue. Could
Mhm.
you talk about why you chose Varangue and also what does it represent?
Yeah. So La Varangue is basically a traditional Creole veranda in Indian Ocean, and so you see Creole houses in La Réunion with this kind of veranda. And first thing, I decided to create an estate, a house with a varangue because it was a traditional house. And I decided also to have this varangue, this veranda, like a metaphor, how to say, it's a kind of a door. You see, it's not totally inside, not totally outside, and it began step by step maybe the main character of the story,
Right,
because everything take place in inside this barong or near the barong. Yeah.
right. Um, After you talk about the very first thing, which is there's the first character who is in France, who's living in France. He has a very boring job. And then we meet the second character through a painting. What gave
Yeah.
you the idea to, include that element of painting and entering into a painting?
Mm, I wanted the characters go to an imaginary world. And it could have been a book, actually. I had
Right.
also the idea of make the characters entering a book. But I chose a painting because it was also maybe something that for people, how to say, you can describe something, it's very visual. Yeah.
And
My
yes.
mother used to paint, so I can say also that it's a kind of tribute to my mother, even if the painting in the book is not the kind of painting she could have paint, I think. But yeah, it was when I was a little girl, I wanted to enter the painting of my mother. I never succeed to do that. And so this idea is linked to childhood also. And I wanted the reader go back to their childhood and have this kind of ideas to enter a specific world describing in a painting or yeah. But I prefer to use a painting than a book.
Right. I think it adds a lot of elements to it that a book couldn't have, I think. Um, when we talk about both of the characters, their lives are completely opposite. They also live in completely different places, but then they come together through this painting because of the theme that is all encompassing in the entire book of death. Um,
Mhm.
was there is that something that inspired you to use that as the primary theme? Because there are other themes around it, which is you've talked about, how do people deal with grief, and then we also have environmental problems. There's also teenage, because one of the characters, she is a teenager. So was there a reason you wanted to focus on the theme of death primarily?
Mm, I wanted to focus on the theme of death and also to include in the book important themes for me. So the power of art. It can be literature, and in the book it's painting, yeah. But art in general, and also the environmental issues and the climate change actually. And at this time, I was interested in and maybe afraid by climate change and by rising sea, etc. And I wanted to put that in the book. And for me, the disappearance of a person is, I will not say it's quite the same, but maybe, yeah, quite the same than the disappearance of a place. You see, the character lost their mothers, and they also, maybe they also will lose the places they love. And in the book, the estate, which is described in the painting, uh, didn't exist anymore. So it doesn't
Right.
exist anymore. It disappeared because of the rising sea. And so it remains only in the painting. And I wanted to make this kind of parallel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add at the very end of the podcast? Do you want to maybe share if you're planning to write another book in the future, or would it
Uh,
be a short story collection?
I don't know. I have a lot of projects.
Okay.
And now I have quite more time to do that. So yeah. But I realize that the themes are always the same, and the main theme is loss. So maybe it's not very a very happy theme, but yeah. Yeah, I have some projects, and as I'm in India, I will have some new ideas, I think.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.